So here's what just happened. Europe's most powerful political body, 47 nations including every major democracy on the continent, opens its doors for the first time in its history to a country outside of Europe. And the country they chose was Canada.
Prime Minister Carney is there right now, and Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, she stepped up to the microphone in Yerevan, Armenia, and named exactly what this partnership now covers, and Canada's there. Trade, critical minerals, defense, Ukraine. Critical minerals are a hot topic lately, and Europe has been scrambling for a stable supply of all of them for 3 years. Well, Canada holds some of the largest reserves on the planet. And as of Armenia, Canada has a formal seat at the exact table where Europe decides who supplies them and on what terms.
Now, I guess we have to talk about the usual elephant in the room, Trump. Now, the United States has spent 18 months applying economic pressure to every single partner that didn't comply with its demands.
But Europe has spent those same 18 months building a legal instrument, the EU Anti-Coercion Instrument. It's specifically designed to push back against exactly that kind of pressure that Trump has been applying. The first non-European country they chose to formally align with that instrument was Canada. Now, that's not sentiment. That is a verdict on American reliability that Europe is now putting into writing.
So before we get into what Canada actually walks away with from Yerevan, well, here is the bottom line. Canada did not attend the summit. Canada joined a strategic bloc, and the United States is on the outside looking in of what just got built.
Now, if that sounds big, well, it is. But to understand why it matters, you have to understand what just changed.
Because for decades, Canada's foreign policy had one default setting: keep the Americans close and happy, keep the Europeans friendly, and hope nobody makes the room weird. Well, the room got really weird now.
Understatement of the century. The United States under Donald Trump has threatened allies with tariffs and created enough uncertainty that other countries are quietly redesigning their backup plans.
And Canada is doing the exact same thing. They're not panicking, there's not a whole ton of drama, but they're doing it with diplomacy, trade deals, defense partnerships, and a very clear message. Canada has options and we're open for business.
And that is why this EPC Summit matters. The European political community was created after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It brings together the EU and non-EU European countries like the UK, Norway, Turkey, Switzerland, and others like that.
Yeah, it's not the EU and it's not NATO. Think about it more like a giant strategic group chat, except instead of emojis and passive-aggressive replies, leaders talk about security, energy, borders, trade, and war.
And now Canada is in that room, the first non-European country, and that tells you something huge.
Yeah. It tells you that Europe sees Canada as useful, stable, resource-rich, democratic, and strategically placed.
And look at the timing. The summit is happening in Armenia, a country trying to loosen its dependence on Russia and move closer to Europe. So Canada showing up is also a signal to smaller democracies that they are not alone.
And that matters a lot, because this is the world we're living in now. Countries are watching who shows up, who keeps promises, who helps when the pressure comes, and who disappears when things get difficult.
Europe is dealing with Russia on its eastern flank. It has instability in the Middle East and pressure from China. Now, a United States that is no longer acting like the steady anchor it once claimed to be.
And Canada is dealing with the same basic problem, right? Just from a different angle. We're beside the US. We trade with the US. We share defense systems with the US. But we cannot build our entire future around one neighbor who keeps threatening to flip the table. That's the through line here.
So Prime Minister Carney's trip is not just symbolic at all. It is strategic. It is Canada saying we are still an Atlantic power, we are still a Pacific power, and we are still an Arctic power. And we are not waiting around for permission from anyone.
Yeah, and that's where the critical raw materials piece really comes in. Sounds boring, but it's actually a huge development.
And Canada has them, Europe needs them, and both sides know they do not want to be dependent on China or the United States alone for the materials that power the next economy.
For ordinary Canadians, what does this mean? Well, it means jobs, investments, mining projects, processing plants, and a chance to build more value here instead of just shipping raw materials out and buying finished products back at premium prices. Very generous of us, but maybe let's stop doing that.
So that's the real shift. Canada's not trying to replace the United States overnight. That would be a fantasy, a nice fantasy, but a fantasy. The US is still our largest trading partner and is deeply connected as our neighbor.
But Canada is trying to reduce the danger of being trapped. Because when one market has too much control over your economy, it doesn't just become a customer, it becomes leverage.
And PM Carney understands leverage. That is why Europe matters. That is why CETA matters. That is why defense procurement matters.
And that is also why Ursula von der Leyen sharing those posts is a bigger deal than it actually looks. She's just not praising Canada to be polite. She is publicly framing Canada as part of Europe's strategic future. Ukraine was also a big issue on the table at this particular summit. And it is really the clearest example because von der Leyen thanked Canada for supporting Ukraine and for joint work to bring abducted children back home. That's not a side issue here. That is the moral center of this whole conversation.
Yeah, Russia's war is not only about territory, it's about whether powerful countries can erase borders, break families apart, and dare the democratic world to move on.
So all of this is why Canada being at the summit matters. We're not there as decoration. We're there because the democratic world is being reorganized in real time.
The old assumption was that the United States would always lead, Europe would coordinate, and Canada would support from the side. But that world is cracking and changing. So this doesn't mean that Canada has become anti-American. Millions of Americans are our friends, our families, our colleagues, our neighbors. You just have a crazy man in charge right now.
Yeah, it does mean, though, that Canada has to stop confusing friendship with dependency. Good neighbors don't demand that you have no other friends.
And that's where Prime Minister Carney's approach is different. He's not just reacting to Trump, he's trying to build structure around Canada's independence. So that's the opportunity here. Canada can be the stable democratic bridge between Europe, North America, and the Arctic, and the Indo-Pacific.
And that is a very Canadian form of power. Quiet until necessary, practical when it counts, and increasingly hard to ignore.
So what do you think? Should Canada be strengthening our ties with the EU, or should we get back to working only with the USA?
We want to hear from you, so let us know in the comments, because your opinion, it matters.
And if you found this helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still thinks that summits, that would be PP, are just expensive meetings with tiny water bottles.
And don't forget to check out the pinned comment for our Substack, our Facebook group, and the links we use for today's episode, because this story is bigger than one meeting in Armenia.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we shall see you tomorrow.
Thanks for watching. Ciao for now.